From September until now, Asia Society presents an exhibition called Art and China's Revolution in its New York Bureau's museum. It is a comprehensive exhibition that considers the artistic achievements of one of the most tumultuous periods in recent Chinese history, the Cultural Revolution. The exhibition brings together large-scale oil paintings, ink paintings, sculptures, drawings, artist sketchbooks, and woodblock prints. There are also posters and other objects from everyday life. Many of them have never been shot in the United States before. Asia Society also installed a bronze mouse jacket in the center of Park Avenue. The installation in somehow is seem like Mao's efforts to persuade everyone to let the revolution break out from the depths of the soul.
To China in 1975, or early in the year when Mao Zedong was still alive and when the Cultural Revolution still continued on. In the mid-70s, before the end of the Cultural Revolution, I mean, visually it was completely different than it was today. Beijing had one tall building, and that was the Beijing Hotel. It was just newly built. There was no other high-rise buildings in the city. There were no cars in the street. You could look all the way down Chang'an and from one end to the other, and all you would see was bicycles, buses, and an occasional Shanghai car or a red flag limousine. People were all dressed in basic, what we call Mao suits in khaki, blue, or gray. There was no fashion, no makeup, no hairstyling, and no advertisements. Obviously, in a coldness, people were very distant, very aloof, very unwilling, unable to be friendly, to make direct contacts, because in those days foreigners were the enemy. I mean, everywhere there were slogans on chimneys and walls and factories, 打倒美国帝国主义跟他的走狗, down with American imperialism and its running dogs. So that was the end of that period when China was extremely ambivalent and even hostile towards foreigners. So Chinese didn't have permission to be friendly, and certainly didn't have permission unless they were authorized to have any kind of relations with foreigners, even to say hello, even to talk. And it was extremely careful in what they said to each other, even in a family. Because a husband could betray a wife, and children regularly betrayed their parents, criticized them as being capitalist roaders and bourgeois, and struggled against them, and in many cases committed physical violence against their own family members, because as Red Guards they were exhorted and encouraged to follow Mao's line and to try to purge out any bourgeois tendencies. So this created a climate of incredible wariness, and I think a good deal of hostility, and a good deal of just anger that couldn't find any expression, because people were abusing each other, mistreating each other, reporting on each other, and in many cases dooming each other, getting people locked up in prison, sent away to a May 7th cadre school or worse. So it wasn't that it was just a question of relations between foreigners and Chinese. I think Chinese themselves, they learned it was better to say very, very little. Just wanted to write about my experiences in China, since at that time very few foreigners had spent much time there. Often those few foreigners who did go to China would, they'd spend a week, 10 days, and they'd just travel around. They wouldn't get a chance to spend several weeks in one place or a month in one place, and much less to work and look around. And the idea was to get to know Chinese, but it was quite difficult. The people you got to know best were children, because they weren't afraid. I think the the Chinese Communist Party would just as soon everybody forget about it, and that it didn't really happen. And they're not particularly happy to have museum shows such as we have downstairs here in the Asia Society. They don't want people to have conferences, write a lot of books, because it was a painful period. And indeed, the people who came to power afterwards, Deng Xiaoping was hurt by it himself. So I think the answer is to try to suppress the memory of it as much as possible. Avoid it. Don't engage in it. Don't dig it up again and try to explain it or deal with it. Now, there are two schools of thought on this. One says it's better not to have to do it a second time through memory, through history. Just forget it. You know, people, that expression in Chinese, you know, you talk about it, it's, you know, 别了, 别说了. Don't talk about it. And obviously it's sensitive for the party as well. But I think there's another school of thought that, and I think it's one Chinese really ought to consider, and in due course I'm sure they will, and that is that you cannot suppress history. And if you don't deal with history, it comes back to bite you. I think you know, there will come a time when Chinese too, perhaps a little further along, will want to go back and look at their own history and ask, why did this happen? How did we allow this to happen to ourselves? And, you know, we hurt each other. We hurt the country. And what was the reason for that? I think it's a very important exercise for any society to go through after such an incredible sort of tectonic and you know, experience that it's impacted society so deeply.